Welcome to today's deep dive. If you've been with us before, you know the drill.
We take a stack of sources, right? Usually articles or research.
Yeah, exactly. But today, we're actually looking at something incredibly raw. It's an unpublished memoir.
Right. Titled The Invisible Power of Karma by...
And our mission today is really to dissect the anatomy of a life-altering mistake. Because, we all have that instinct, right? When we mess up on a massive scale, the immediate impulse is just to run.
Oh, absolutely. The flight response.
You just want to pack up your life, change cities, find a clean slate.
The classic fresh start.
Exactly. But what happens when you blow up a picture-perfect life for like a fleeting desire, and instead of finding freedom, you end up trapped inside the emotional rubble of that very decision?
For the next 25 years, no less.
Right. It's wild.
It completely dismantles the whole cultural mythology we have built around the fresh start. Prakash's memoir, it operates on this core thesis that really challenges how we view loss.
Yeah, there's a specific quote he uses, right?
Right. She writes, "Death is not the greatest loss in life. The greatest loss is a relationship that dies while we are still alive."
Wow. That is heavy.
It is. And that framework, it shifts the focus away from the initial act of betrayal. Because the actual story here isn't the affair itself.
Right, it's a fallout.
Exactly, the agonizing slow-motion fallout that basically consumes the rest of his adulthood.
So to really understand the gravity of that fallout, we have to look at the sheer height from which he fell. His early life reads like a masterclass in survival.
It really does.
He starts out as this struggling student in Kathmandu, and he actually fails high school.
Which, for many people, that's a dead end.
Totally.
Yeah.
But instead of stopping there, he makes this really sharp pivot and joins the army.
Which is actually a highly effective psychological strategy for someone in his position.
How's that?
Well, when your internal motivation is completely depleted by failure, the military provides this sort of external scaffolding of discipline.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, he uses that rigid environment to manufacture resilience. And once he builds that baseline, he returns to his education with this relentless, almost desperate drive.
Yeah, he ends up mastering both English and Japanese.
Right, which, given his limited resources at the time, that requires an extraordinary level of cognitive endurance.
And that endurance really pays off.
Yeah.
By 1985, he secures this highly coveted position on a Japanese hydroelectric power project in Nepal.
A huge deal.
A huge deal. And amidst all this intense upward trajectory, he experiences this classic sweeping romance.
Right, the fairy tale element.
Yeah, he falls for a woman who just happens to walk past his retail shop. But her family strictly opposes the match because of deeply ingrained cultural and caste norms.
So they use a loophole.
Yes, this fascinating cultural loophole. They run away together for 10 days.
Because in their specific cultural context, if a couple stays away for that duration, the family essentially loses their social leverage.
Right, they basically have no choice but to accept the union. So they marry, they have 2 children, and they build a highly prosperous life. They even find significant wealth in real estate.
But notice the pattern here. Prakash has conquered poverty. He conquered academic failure.
He circumvented rigid cultural barriers.
Exactly. And he mastered the real estate market. He has spent his entire life in a state of high-stakes conflict, and he has won every single battle.
Which brings up a really dangerous dynamic.
Right.
When your entire identity is built around fighting for survival, that drive is like a muscle.
It gets incredibly strong.
Yeah. But when you finally win, and there are no more battles to fight, that muscle starts looking for resistance.
Oh, definitely.
Like if you've ever found yourself subconsciously picking a fight with a partner on a perfectly peaceful Sunday, just because you're used to stress, you know this feeling.
Yes.
Prakash didn't build a fortress to protect his family. He built a war machine. And when the war was over, the machine turned inward.
That is the precise mechanism of midlife complacency for high achievers.
The war machine turning inward.
Right, because when the struggle for survival is no longer the primary focus, the ego experiences this profound boredom.
Interesting.
The brain is so wired for those dopamine hits generated by overcoming obstacles that it will actively seek out new destructive challenges just to feel that familiar adrenaline.
Wow.
So Prakash's ambition, the very trait that kept him alive in his youth, it basically mutated into an arrogant blind spot. He felt invincible.
And that invincibility just completely shatters after 10 years of marriage.
Right.
He meets a young woman seeking funding for her education, and there is a 22-year age gap between them.
Significant gap.
Huge. And a casual coffee to discuss her schooling escalates into a drive. and then the stolen kiss in a parked car.
Which rapidly spirals into a full-blown affair.
Right. He even helps her secure a position at his firm so they can maintain this double life. But the discovery of this affair, that's where the memoir takes a really jarring turn.
So not what you expect at all.
No. It isn't a tearful confession. His wife actually finds out from someone at his office. And reading his reaction to being caught, it was completely counterintuitive to me.
Yeah, you would expect a man who just destroyed his family to collapse in apologies.
Exactly. But instead he becomes violently defensive. The confrontation actually escalates to a point where he strikes his wife in the face.
Yeah, clinically, that reaction is a textbook extreme defense mechanism.
What's it called?
It's known as shame projection. He isn't actually angry at his wife in that moment.
He's not.
No. When his secret is exposed, he experiences a sudden, unbearable influx of cognitive dissonance.
Right, because his self-image is threatened.
Exactly. He believes he is an honorable, successful man, but the evidence proves he is deceitful and destructive.
And the brain just can't handle that.
Right. The brain cannot hold those two conflicting identities at once without severe distress. Striking her was basically a physical manifestation of his inability to process his own guilt.
That makes so much sense.
He tried to project his internal ugliness onto her to avoid looking at it himself.
And his wife's response to this is just staggering.
It really is.
She doesn't retaliate. She actually offers him a clear path back. She tells him that if he ends the affair, she will offer him full forgiveness to keep their family intact.
Total grace.
Yeah. And even his own mother gives him this haunting warning. She tells him that if he leaves this marriage, he will endure hardship like a stray dog.
A stray dog. That is such a powerful image.
It is.
Yeah.
But he refuses the life raft. And this really challenges the standard cultural narrative we hear about infidelity.
How so?
Well, usually the story is, oh, I was deeply unhappy in my marriage, so I strayed. But Prakash explicitly admits he wasn't unhappy. He was prospering.
Right.
He was just arrogant.
Well, you have to realize accepting that life raft requires a person to admit they are drowning.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
For a man who spent decades constructing an identity of total self-reliance and success, admitting he just sabotaged his own life is a narcissistic injury he just cannot tolerate.
So the forgiveness was actually the problem.
Yes. The unconditional forgiveness his wife offered was actually far more threatening to his ego than the affair itself.
Because it forced him to look in the mirror?
Exactly. To accept her grace, he would have to sit in the ashes of his own shame. By leaving his wife for the younger woman, he operates under this psychological justification that his desires are simply exceptional.
He repackages his failure.
Right, as a bold step toward a liberating second chapter.
But that second chapter immediately devolves into a nightmare. I mean, he marries the younger woman, expecting this fresh start, but the foundation is entirely toxic.
From day one.
From day one. And the core of this toxicity really reveals itself in this deeply agonizing conflict over her becoming pregnant.
Right.
Prakash is already stretched financially and emotionally by the children from his first marriage. So he begs his new wife to abort the pregnancy.
He offers to pay for her ongoing education instead, right?
Yes, hoping to delay having a child until they have some sort of stability. But she outright refuses.
Because she views the child as her only leverage.
Leverage,
Yeah, this relationship was born out of deception, which means it lacks a foundation of mutual trust.
True.
She's acutely aware that she is the other woman,
Right.
and therefore entirely replaceable.
Oh, I see.
So she uses the pregnancy as an anchor to secure her permanent place in his life.
Wow.
Prakash, on the other hand, is terrified of repeating his failures as a father, yet he finds himself completely powerless to stop the cycle. They are locked in this standoff driven entirely by fear.
And the collateral damage from this standoff hits his existing children the hardest.
It's devastating.
They eventually move in with Prakash and his new wife, basically stepping into a house filled with the chill of a deeply resentful stepmother.
She feels burdened by their presence.
And the kids feel like intruders. I mean, the generational ripples here are devastating, particularly for his son.
Right.
Growing up in this fractured, tense environment, the son develops severe struggles with addiction. And to maintain this fragile, toxic peace with his new wife, who claims she doesn't feel safe around the son, Prakash actually asks his own child to move out.
Unbelievable.
He sets his son up in a basement apartment where he works as a dishwasher.
That is the tragic culmination of the sunk cost fallacy right there.
It's a sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah. Prakash has sacrificed his entire first family, his reputation, and his self-respect for this second marriage.
Right, he gave up everything.
So to admit the second marriage is a failure would mean all that destruction was for absolutely nothing.
Oh, man.
So he protects the illusion of his new life at all costs, even if the cost is abandoning his own son. He believes he is keeping the peace, but he is actually just preserving his own denial.
You know, thinking about this dynamic, it's clear Prakash tried to cure a profound internal sickness by simply changing his address.
Classic mistake.
It's like moving to a new house because your old one has termites.
Right.
But packing up all the infested furniture and taking it with you. You set up your new living room, and within months, the new walls are being eaten alive by the exact same bugs.
That is what therapists call the geographical cure. It's one of the most common fallacies in human psychology.
We always blame the location.
We assume the external environment, the city, the job, the partner was the root of our misery. But the unhealed wounds of the past will always infect the present because you carry the blueprint for that dysfunction in your own mind.
Right.
Prakash discovers that a relationship born out of avoidance and pain cannot magically transform into something healthy just because you signed a new marriage certificate.
So, suffocating under the resentment of his second wife, the guilt of failing his children, and the ghost of his first marriage, Prakash hits his absolute breaking point.
And true to his established patterns, his instinct is to run.
Exactly. He flees to an Osho ashram in Nepal. His intention is to completely abandon his second family and live out the rest of his days as a monk.
Just disappearing into spiritual silence.
Yeah. But the silence doesn't offer an escape, because without the daily chaos to distract him, he is forced to sit with himself.
Which is terrifying for him.
Very. And while he's there, he writes down this realization that completely shifts the trajectory of the memoir. He writes, "You cannot walk into love while holding a sword."
The sword is the perfect metaphor for ego defensiveness.
How so?
It represents his need to control outcomes, his constant justification of his actions, and his unresolved guilt.
Right?
He realizes that for decades, he has been approaching every single human connection armed for a battle. He was viewing vulnerability as a threat to his survival.
And he also uses his time at the ashram to completely redefine his understanding of karma.
Which is a huge shift.
It is. I mean, we usually talk about karma as this cosmic vending machine, right? You put in bad deeds, you get back divine punishment. Exactly. But Prakash realizes karma is actually just a psychological mirror.
Oh, I like that.
It reflects your own unresolved pain and intentions back at you through the people you interact with.
The most analytical part of his realization there is how he breaks down relationship survival into what he calls the 3 pillars of love.
Right. Chemistry, compatibility, and connection.
Yes. Chemistry is that biological, magnetic draw. Compatibility is the shared architecture of your lives, your values, your daily routines, your financial goals.
And he realizes his second marriage had absolutely zero chemistry and zero compatibility.
Right. They disagreed on fundamentally everything.
Which brings us to the third pillar.
Connection. Now, we usually think of connection as this warm, positive bond.
Yeah, like we really connected.
Exactly. But the ashram teachings help Prakash realize that connection can be incredibly dark.
It doesn't have to be positive.
No. He and the second wife survived for years purely on a trauma bond. They were connected by the sheer gravitational pull of their shared guilt and that sunk cost fallacy we talked about earlier.
Oh.
That painful karmic knot became their connection.
Recognizing that difference is such a profound psychological breakthrough. And what makes this awakening legitimate is his subsequent action.
Right, what he actually does next.
Because he doesn't stay at the ashram. He realizes that abandoning his second family would just be another evasion.
Another geographical cure.
Exactly. So he goes back home.
Which is really the ultimate irony of spiritual seeking.
Right.
You climb a mountain looking for enlightenment, but the actual work is waiting for you in your tense, quiet living room.
And he doesn't walk into some cinematic, tearful reconciliation either. He returns to a very quiet, patient coexistence.
He stops fighting.
Yeah. He stops reacting defensively to his second wife's provocations. He stops trying to force love where it doesn't naturally exist. He simply brings presence.
He essentially adopts the identity of an unenlightened Buddha.
An unenlightened Buddha.
Yeah, he lets go of the desperate need to be right, the need to be adored, and the need to somehow fix the past.
He just lets it be.
Right. By simply observing his life and his marriage without constantly reacting to it, Prakash finally breaks the cycle of his own suffering.
That's incredible.
He changes his karma not by changing his wife, but by rewiring his own nervous system's response to her.
It is a very sobering kind of peace. Which brings us to the bittersweet epilogue of this 25-year saga.
Right.
After decades of living in a state of legal separation from his first wife, decades where Prakash refused to force the issue or demand closure, she finally files for divorce.
And how does he react?
He feels no relief. He describes a profound emptiness and the ultimate acceptance that things happen in their own time.
Yeah.
He couldn't force her to forgive him, and he couldn't force her to let him go until she was completely ready.
Well, that emptiness is the natural byproduct of true acceptance. It perfectly encapsulates the invisible power of karma.
Right.
We set actions into motion, often recklessly, but we have absolutely no control over when or how the bill comes due. The only variable we can control is the posture we take in the present moment when that bill finally arrives on our table.
Examining a life like Prakash's really forces you to look at your own behaviors. Are you holding a sword in your relationships?
It's a great question to ask yourself.
It really is. Are your daily interactions driven by unresolved wounds? Or are you actually responding with awareness?
Most of us are just reacting.
Totally. We spend immense amounts of energy obsessing over the professional or financial legacy we are going to leave behind. We build massive fortresses of success.
Just like Prakash did.
Exactly. But what if our true legacy is actually the emotional wreckage or the emotional healing we leave in the nervous systems of the people we sit across from at the dinner table every single night?
That's the real legacy.
It is. As you move through the rest of your day, think about the life you're building. If you blew it all up today to chase a fleeting desire, could you survive living in the rubble for the next 25 years?
Most people couldn't.
Consider what kind of karmic mirror you are holding up to the people you love right now.